I'm going to be talking to you about things that you need to know for the rhetorical analysis. The first one is the rhetorical triangle. Um, we've already gone through the assignment sheet, so I want to make sure that you have kind of the background for this so you can write a decent paper and not be lost and frustrated and all of that. So I've included this in the folder under course information and then major assignments and then rhetorical analysis stuff. So there's a handout there. You can print that off and hang on to it and walk through with me, or you can just kind of hang out and walk through with me. Either way. The rhetorical triangle is a triangle instead of a parallelogram or a square or whatever, because all of the sides, all of the points are connected and they each touch all the others. We put context in the middle because it touches everything too. And anyway, that's kind of why that's the way it is. A rhetorical analysis is using each element of the triangle to analyze and evaluate a piece of writing to see if it does what it says it does, basically. There are, like I said, there are four parts. The writer, and that's the author of the piece. We'll talk a little bit later about your ethos as the analyst. But the writer is from the Greek word ethos. We get the words ethics, and that's kind of what the thing is. The big question is, why should you believe me? If I'm the writer of an article that you are reading and evaluating, why should you believe me? Part of that is dependent on all the other pieces, right? It's all about credibility. Does this author use trusted sources? Is their tone, which is their attitude toward the subject, appropriate? Is their attitude towards their readers appropriate? And you can hear that. You can see that when you're reading through. You can hear it. I hear it in my head when I'm reading through things. And you know that they think their readers are adequately intelligent to follow them along. And also that their subject is worth talking about, or why bother writing the article in the first place, right? The other part of credibility is what we call inclusive language use. This is, again, part of where it's published, why it's published, but it's dependent on the writer to pick up those clues and to use them appropriately. And so inclusive language in some areas will be slanted towards a particular audience's view. And you can tell this when you're reading things. And, you know, on social media, this tone and inclusive language use gets blown up all over the place. Are you writing for everyone? If so, you have to be careful about how you address your audience. One of the things that I always tell my students is try really hard to stay away from using second person, and that's you and your, unless you're actually talking to your reader. And sometimes that's totally appropriate, but most of the time, especially in really formal writing and in peer-reviewed journals as well, it's best to use the we. It's inclusive, right? The you is more pointing a finger and it can be considered exclusive, excluding language. But the big part here is, again, why should we believe the writer? Okay, what do they do to help us believe them? What do they do with the information? What do they do with their tone to help us so that we can better understand what they're trying to get across? The audience, us, okay, is from the Greek pathos. We get things like sympathy and empathy and pathetic. In the original form of the word pathetic, it was anything that brings up an emotion. Now we consider, if somebody says, oh, that was pathetic, they mean it was lame, right? It didn't work. But the big question for the audience is, why should we care? What does this have to do with us? How can we use this information? Why should we be paying attention? And part of the way it comes across with the text is in shared values. The author and the audience share certain values addressing ethical and quote unquote political concerns. And we're not just talking about politics like Democrats versus Republicans. We're talking about a lot of ways that people interact with each other. The other part is not just shared values, but shared interests or goals, um, addressing the outcomes, the changes, how we're going to get there, what we're going to do, who has to sacrifice what, what's the payoff, all those kinds of things go on. The text itself is based on the word logos, which is, we get the word logical, um, and all of those ologies, biology, geology, um, the written of something. And the big question for the text is, does it make sense? Not just in what it says, but how it says it, what order, the organization of the particular article, does it fall so that you can follow from one point to another? The document design has a big part of how we read things, what we read. It's very different to go look at BuzzFeed or Reddit versus a peer-reviewed journal. They're going to look very different on the page, not just sound different to our ears. And we have to think about that too in how we format things. And I'll get back to what this means for you in writing an article here in just a minute. The last piece is the center of the triangle, and that is context. It comes from our Greek word locus, which means place, and we get that location, elocution, all those things. And this is not really a question, it's the reasons for writing. Why did this piece get published? How did it get published? In what medium? We say social media because there's multiple ones. Medium is the singular. Why is it here? Why is it getting published in this particular spot? And what are the criteria for getting published? And then what are the genre expectations? What do we expect this particular type of writing to do for us, or to do to us? Depends upon how you look at it, right? The other part of this is, so when we're looking at something that has been republished in a textbook, like the article that you're working on, we have to think about the original text, where it was published, who it was targeting as an audience, why it would be there, what it would look like. And then, okay, so why did they pick it to go into this freshman writing book? Okay, so there's two different sets here. And we are the secondary audience, but we have a voice, right? It should speak to us in some way. It should help us in some way, not just be fodder for an assignment. And so the way the rhetorical triangle works together is, in the rhetorical analysis, you choose how you're going to evaluate the article based on the 4 parts. And for a rhetorical analysis, you have to look at all 4 parts. You also have to give us a summary of the article so we know what you're talking about. And the rhetorical triangle is helpful for lots of different ways. Sometimes you only have to do an audience analysis. Sometimes you only have to look at, why should we believe this article or this author? And so you can be assigned or choose to do one thing or the other depending upon what your writing assignment is. But for a rhetorical analysis, you have to do all 4. And for the context and the audience, you have to look at things from the original and then for us, and see how those things are different. I hope this helps you a bit. I know it's a short video, but I also know you guys would rather have short videos than long ones, so I'm trying really hard. Anyway, this is a good start for your paper, and I hope it helps.